the year of 1275. The waters of the River Thames washed right up against that wall behind you. They then pushed the river back, outer wall is built, and they raised the road 12 feet, and that's what you're standing on. Behind me just there is one of the most famous, or some might say infamous gates in the world, Traitor's Gate. Built during the reign of King Edward I, that is originally called the Watergate, because it stood right against the water. Anyone here from the United States of America? Watergate. Something else we had before you. The name Traitor's Gate, that evolved around the Tudor period, simply because the amount of prisoners brought into the Tower this way. To those gates and up those steps walked 4 Queens of England: Queen Anne Boleyn, Queen Catherine Howard, Lady Jane Grey, and she was the then Princess Elizabeth. Now, of those 4 individuals, 3 of them still here. They never managed to leave. And I'll show you where they're buried later in the chapel, minus their heads. The one that did come this way, through the gates and up the steps, she went into 2 months of imprisonment, was the then Princess Elizabeth. Now, she's held here for 2 months on the orders of her half-sister, Queen Mary. Mary the First, Bloody Mary. Same thing, call it what you will. Mary Tudor, she gets referred to as. It's all the same person. Mary thinks Elizabeth is plotting against her, locks her up for 2 months, but after 2 months, no evidence, they released her. 4 years later, Elizabeth came back. Mary is dead. Elizabeth prepares for her coronation. I'm pretty sure you know she was crowned Queen Elizabeth I. Situated above Traitor's Gate, St Thomas's Tower, also built during the reign of King Edward I. Now that tower gets its name from St Thomas of Becket. He was murdered on the steps of Canterbury Cathedral on the orders of Edward I's grandfather. Contained within there is the medieval palace of Edward I. If you want to see it, simply walk up those steps to your right-hand side. Go up the steps, you can wander through the palace. That will take you across this bridge and into that tower, the Wakefield Tower. Beyond that, the entire south, east, and half the north ramparts are open for you to explore. The Wakefield Tower, that was where King Henry VI was murdered. He got himself stabbed in the back whilst at prayer, 21st of May 1471, during the War of the Roses. Now, Henry VI was a great scholar. He founded 2 schools you may have heard of. They are Eton College and King's College, Cambridge. And so, on the anniversary of his death, the deans of those 2 colleges come to the town and take part in a ceremony. It's known as the Ceremony of the Lilies and Roses. A service takes place in the Wakefield Tower. During that service, the deans lay the floral emblems of their colleges, lilies and roses, on the exact spot where Henry VI was murdered. The flowers are left there for just 24 hours. They're then taken away, burnt, and cast into the river as a mark of respect to the king. Look to the north, you'll see what is now called the Bloody Tower. That was originally called the Garden Tower. Shakespeare refers to it as the Tower of Blood, because all the dark and evil deeds that have taken place within those walls. So it is during the reign of Queen Elizabeth I, the name changes to the Bloody Tower. Now, one of the darkest, evilest, probably most famous deeds to take place was in the upper chamber in 1483, and it was the murder, or was it disappearance, of the 2 young princes. Now, they were the uncrowned Edward V and his younger brother Richard, the Duke of York. They're aged just 12 and 9. Some people think they simply disappeared, walked out, vanished, kidnapped. Plausible, but I doubt it. Most people believe they were murdered. Now, if it was murder, there are 2 prime suspects. One was their uncle, Richard, the Duke of Gloucester. History will tell us also the prime suspect in the murder of Henry VI. But why would he want to kill him? With the boys are out of the way, Uncle Richard is first in line to the throne, and they crowned him King Richard III. 2 years later, he got himself killed, fighting at the Battle of Bosworth. He was killed by the army of a man called Henry Tudor. On that battlefield, Henry Tudor is crowned with a bloody crown. He is now Henry VII. Neither Henry VII or Richard III would be king if young Prince Edward survives and is crowned. They're both of them pretty much a good motive to murder the 2 young princes. Let's say some people think they simply disappeared. We'll never know. What we do know is 191 years later, some workmen are working through the archway to the right on the base of the White Tower when they discovered a box. Now, they were really happy. They thought they'd found hidden treasure. Imagine their horror and dismay. They opened that box. Inside, simply what was left of 2 young boys. Experts at the time go, these are the remains of the 2 young princes. Charles II therefore commands they are taken to Westminster Abbey. That's where they're buried to this day, in Innocents' Corner, which he then named in their honour. It's not always been a place of murder, though. It has been a place of imprisonment. Its most famous prisoner was a man called Sir Walter Raleigh. Now, Raleigh was a famous navigator and explorer during the reign of Queen Elizabeth I. He founded Virginia and North Carolina. He then gets himself locked in there for 13 long years of his life. Gentlemen, you might consider that to be a bit rough. Well, consider this. They locked that poor man in that tower for 13 long years with his wife. That is how much they hated that man. Raleigh in there, on the orders of King James I, he said Raleigh always denied it for plotting to put Lady Arabella Stuart on the throne. Raleigh's more famous, though. Raleigh was the man who brought potatoes and tobacco into England. Now, like Thomas More, Raleigh wrote whilst he was a prisoner in that tower. His unfinished work, A History of the World, is on display in the lower chamber, where you can learn a lot more about it. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll shortly walk through the Blue Tower Arch. When we do look up, you'll see the second portcullis. That one's been up there over 700 years. It weighs 2.5 tons, but that one is still in full working order. Also, as you go through, if you glance to the left, there's a small metal ring. Now, that used to be used to tie up the boats, for the river was pushed back and the outer wall was eventually built.